Hello, my fellow Extraordinary Americans. I'm Cosmos Dar, and this is Extraordinary America. What is Extraordinary America about? You see, American identity is about freedom, the opportunity for a better life, and the pursuit of happiness. Welcome back to the show, my fellow Extraordinary Americans. For today's guest, we have a special guest who I've interviewed before, whose name is Dan Vega. Dan is a very successful entrepreneur, investor, business coach, strategic advisor, talk show host, and speaker. He has coached everyone from celebrities to some of the topmost companies found in Forbes magazine, and also specializes in helping companies maximize profits while also reducing their costs and their overhead. He's recognized today in the nation as one of the top speakers out there. Dan and his clients have been featured in TV appearances such as Ellen, AC360, Fox News, ABC, the Boston Globe, Yahoo, NBC, and Good Morning America. Dan started his first business at 19, and he was written and spoken in the field of business for over 20 years, and he has been hailed as America's #1 results guy. He's achieved extreme success in several careers, including sales, marketing, management, corporate restructuring, and consulting. And he also understands the business world from top to bottom and specializes in helping companies become profitable multi-million dollar enterprises. He was considered one of the top experts in the country with assisting companies to secure funding, and he has been connected with as many as 400 private equity investors, institutional investors, venture capital groups, and angel investors. He now holds ownership in several successful companies and is personally invested in several spaces in the market. Some of these include film and television, technology, health, environmental, spirits, arts, and fashion. He's also one of the co-founders of a book publishing company and nearly a dozen best-selling authors. But of all of Dan's accomplishments, his most significant is the pioneering of a completely new economic system for the US and abroad. This revolutionary new structure is based not on scarcity, as our current global market is, but rather from the perspective of thrive and abundance for all. He has taught this system to billionaires, thought leaders, and global titans impacting millions. He's an extraordinary American, and I'm glad and honored to have him on the show. Dan, it's so good to have you over here.
Wow, thank you, man. That's a lot. Appreciate being on, man. Good to see you again.
But Dan, can you tell me and the audience a little bit more about your story, your background, and how you got started?
Yeah, I grew up in Los Angeles area, and both my parents were great people, but never had any financial success. My father worked in retail. My mom was a teacher's aide and a waitress during the summers. And again, really good people, but you can't teach what you don't know. So obviously, like most of us, was raised in a very scarcity survive kind of situation, certainly not thrive in abundance. So it's like, which bills do we have to get to pay? Which ones do we have to push and buy timelines and rob Peter to pay Paul kind of thing. That was my upbringing. But fortunately for me, I excel at mathematics. And because of that, I got the eye and ear of some mentors early on when I was very young. And I was fortunate enough to have some really great people want to mentor me. I'm stubborn sometimes, so they were very patient. But eventually that led to a multi-million dollar non-traditional education, as well as the action steps and the things it would take to create success. So a lot of my success over the years has been just applying what I learned and what somebody was courteous enough to teach me.
So, Dan, I know like you came from extreme poverty and scarcity, right? And then you went from there to an abundance mindset and having abundance in your life. So, could you tell the audience how you transitioned from that stage to the stage of abundance? Because a lot of people find it difficult to achieve that.
Yeah, I mean, there's no shortage of books or podcasts like this that can show us exactly what we need to do or what we have to learn to be successful. But that's not really the problem. What people don't realize is regardless of what level of success we acquire, even at the highest level, 80% of success is mindset, and 20% of success is mechanics and action steps and strategy based, right? And so I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday about if you have the mindset to achieve low six figures, you can hit nine figures. And that's a big difference because it's just once you start thinking a certain way, it's not necessarily just the action steps. We can learn that in many books and other mediums, but it's the mindset. And it's hard to let go of paradigm thinking and limiting beliefs. I was helping a couple. They're asset rich millionaires worth a few $1 million, but their income is around $500,000 a year. and they want to get to 8 figures. And so I said, okay, how do we get to that $10 million mark or even higher than that? So I had them play this game where they just started off at 100,000 a month. So I said, if you get, let's say 250,000 a week extra paycheck, 100,000 a month, and excuse me, 25,000 a week. And I go, what would you do with the money? And they were like, okay, I got 25,000 in this week. I'm going to do this and this and this. Okay, next check's in. What are you going to do? Likely there's going to be some upfront purchases, some payoff things. But after a while, it gets a little bit ridiculous. It's like, what are you going to do with this? The third check. Well, oh, sorry, next check's already in. What are you going to do now? And they just start laughing. And what that's saying is subconsciously, their mind is just, it's laughable, right? You can't even wrap your mind around an extra 25,000 a week or an extra 100,000 a month. Well, if we can't even wrap our mind around it, if that exercise seems ridiculous, it's going to be impossible for it to become a reality. Our mind's not even accepting it. It sounds foreign and ridiculous.
Mhm.
The first thing is we have to get comfortable with wealth. When we can get comfortable with that, then it's like, look, you said you want to be in the 8 figures. What would it look like to be a million a month? How about 250,000 a week? And they just crack up and they're just laugh because it's so ridiculous. Well, until it's not ridiculous and we know exactly where the money would go and it seems logical, then our mind won't accept thinking in those new patterns. And then again, it's never going to become a reality. So there's a lot of things that we can do to help transition from that scarcity mindset to a thrive in abundance mindset. I'll give you two other things. Is somebody in scarcity mindset, they're very competitive. And I think competition is very healthy, especially in sports. I don't believe everybody should get a medal. But in business, I think that all competition really comes from a scarcity survival thinking. I spent years in the seminar business doing financial seminars, and people would ask me all the time, how do you protect your intellectual property? People just stealing your talks. How do you mitigate that? And I go, I don't. If anybody wants the talks, I'll send them all the PowerPoints, right? Because thinking that just because so-and-so is making way more money, automatically I make less. There's plenty for everybody. That it's not like there's only so much to go around. Everybody can be successful. Plus, it's in the execution and follow through, which most people won't do anyways. And even if they did, there's plenty for everyone. And if we run out, the universe will create more. But we can't think so much in scarcity. And the other piece of a thrive and abundance mindset is giving. We want to make sure that that's a really big part of our life is doing things, spending our time and resources in giving back. They always say that if you ask a student to become a teacher, immediately he becomes a better student, right? Because he has to switch lenses from being a student to a teacher, and it's going to mean growth. It's going to have him look at things in a different light. And so we got to start teaching the things that we're weak at, become astute at those things, and then start giving, finding ways to give with our resources, our time, attention, even finances. And that's going to help us make that transition into thrive in abundance.
So, Dan, you bring up an interesting point about competition and also like scarcity versus abundance. And on a macro level, on a national and global level, capitalism as we know it today which of Adam Smith is an important member. They say that the resources are finite, and basically they go through like a competitive mindset. So, from your perspective, what do you think about the economic system we have right now?
If you think about just our study of, say, economics means that if me and you do a deal and I walk away saying I definitely got the better of that deal, that means that you got the worst of the deal, right? Because it's like 51-49 or 60%, 40%. And that's not the way the world works. I mean, technically, that's how dollars could work, but it's just not how things work. I remember hearing a story years ago about this certain plant it only grew in certain areas. And so this team of scientists and doctors go down to this remote part, and we're talking about these people have never seen modern day civilization. They've never seen a helicopter before. They don't even, right?
Yeah.
And they find this plant, and these people eat the properties of it. They use it for their part. There's very little to no disease in these villages, and they want to make a joint venture deal. They want to harvest this plant. And he tells the guy, everybody's using machetes and doing everything by hand, this village. And the person out of the village, they say, let's do a deal. Here's what we'll do is if you give us X amount of this plant every year in supply so we can use it for medicine, we'll buy you a big tractor. And it's this high level thing. It's going to be able to do what you guys do in a month, probably within an afternoon, right?
Mhm.
And the person that ran the village says, that's not a good deal for us, right? That's not a good deal because how would we sustain the tractor? How would we get access to gasoline? We don't have the roads, right? How would we repair it? And the guy was like, well, I was going to spend a lot of money on this. And then the villager says, listen, here's a better deal for us. We'll give you all the supplies and all the plants that you want for this. And what we want is 20 machetes, 20 brand new machetes, and 10 sharpening stones.
Mhm.
Now, you go from spending, let's say, $250,000, $500,000 on this piece of machinery to 20 machetes and that's like hundreds of dollars, not even thousands, right? But to them, it was a better deal because it's something sustainable. And the villager said, listen, we can now, because we have more machetes and sharpening stones, we can actually suffice that need within 3 months of the year, which gives us better tools for another 9 months. And it's going to be better for us. So it's not just a dollars and cents thing. Both walked away with abundance, right? They both walked away saying, I definitely got the better part of that deal. But economics teaches if one side gets the better deal, the other side gets the worst deal. And that's just not how the world works. And following that model it keeps us in staying in scarcity and survive. You know what I mean? Because our mind is very interesting. We have an operating system running all the time in our subconscious, and that our operating system is recording 24/7. So even if we do things that are scarcity behavior, let's say we're driving a car every day that we hate. And we're doing it because we're like, well, I don't mind driving this for now because I don't want to take on too much. I want to save money. And it's not an asset, it's a liability. So right now I'm just going to drive this and I'm going to live here and I'm going to live way under my means. I get the sense of that, and a lot of people do it. But you know what it also does? It keeps you in scarcity mindset because every day when you're driving, your mindset is recording it and your subconscious is saying, this ain't working, man. It ain't working. We got to do something different. Whereas by upgrading to that new car now, you're going to acclimate to the payment, but your mindset is getting verification every day saying, this is working. What else can we do? And it's more important to adopt the mindset of thrive in abundance than it is to just hoard cash. Hoard cash and live under your means is a defense move. It's not offense. It's only defense. And getting a thrive in abundance mindset is going to lead to not only offense, but winning.
No, you bring up a very important point about a lot of things in our world ultimately is like a zero-sum game. A lot of people
Yeah.
have that mentality. And one thing that I've noticed personally, and I would want to know your perspective, is in this world where there's a zero-sum game and then there's a scarcity mindset in this economic structure that we have, there's also a lack of ethics, or where it starts off ethical, but over a period of time, society degenerates as a result of this thing. But from your perspective, how do you see this?
Yeah, it's a major problem. If you think about big business right now, their barometer is what? Legal or illegal. So then you have companies, and that trickles down into small business and even the family unit. And you have these companies that are like, they're just not breaking the law. That's the minimum bar. We don't break the law. And then they're hailed as these amazing companies to work for and these very ethical companies. Look, just because something's legal doesn't make it ethical, right? So we have to get used to following a higher moral code that is just set forth from our local, federal, and state laws. And we have to get in the habit of doing what is right, not just what is legal. So when we think about our values and ethics and doing what is right by others, treating them the way that we would want to be treated, being others focused, if you're going into doing deals together, thinking in terms of abundance in their best interest, how do I do a deal that's good for me, but leave them with an abundance of value? And those are going to lead to those long-term partnerships that will that will create wealth over time. But you're right, it starts with our ethics and our value systems. And we've really relied too much on big business and schools to help mold our value systems, our personal value systems. If you go to somebody and you say, "What do you do?" What are they going to say? They're going to tell you what they do for a living. Because what we do for a living has become so definitive as who we are as people. So when companies put rules on us and say, "We want you to make money and do these jobs under these parameters when it comes to our ethics. We won't break the law, but do it this way." We allow that because we have to. We feel like we have to. Well, that we don't realize it trickles down into the family unit as well. I have friends that are teachers of like elementary school, and these kids are using very foul language and talking about very inappropriate things. And the parents are saying, "Well, you're the teacher, it's your responsibility." And we can't let our teachers or our corporations raise our children or tell us what value system we're going to have in our families. We have to establish a written code of family values and how we're going to treat others, and then carry that into our business practices. And that certainly is going to help us not only get to and maintain a thrive in abundance thinking, but it's going to help us be the catapult to lead lots of other people into that thinking.
So, Dan, this is a question based on that I definitely wanted to ask you, like as a devil's advocate, right? So, some people would say that a lot of people have gotten successful without the lack of ethics, and then we'll point out to Wall Street and some of the big business leaders that we find today. So, what would you say to those people that think that immorality pays? And what is your opinion on that?
Yeah, there is a lot of people, especially in big business, that are under the misconception of like, look, we have to get into the gray areas because our competitors are willing to just cheat and lie and steal. We have to get at least the cusp of that to stay competitive. And not only, I can tell you from experience, it's not true, but when you increase your ethics and you increase your integrity, you make more money. Because at the end of the day, we still want to do business with people that we know and trust. That's just it. That's how humans, at the end of the day, are people, regardless of where they're from. And so when you do things very ethically and you really think about deep personal relationships, not one-off deals, but long-term relationships, then increasing our ethics and thinking about how to provide real value to other people. Over time, maybe you can make a little more money short term by cutting corners, but long term, you're going to not only make more money, but you're going to sustain it. We read about all the Epsteins of the world and the movie producer guys and all these people that eventually, yeah, they create wealth, but eventually, because they did it on a bad foundation of sand, because their ethics and morals, their empires come toppling down. And so that's not something that we want to do, is invest decades of work into something that's going to be brought down because we're not building it on a strong foundation when it comes to our ethics and values. So I think that it's certainly a key to not only big success, but long-term sustainable success.
No, Dad, I'm really appreciate that you're talking about this because there's like a perception about capitalism right now with regards to big
Yeah.
business, Wall Street, and everything. But then society needs to know that there's also the other side as well. And over the long term, integrity and ethics leads to a long term success.
Yeah, I mean, so many times now when you think about the word capitalism, people even associate that with like a political party, right? And the fact of the matter is, when you look at Wall Street and some companies, they're capitalists. Yeah, they have bad behavior, and that's giving it a bad name. I don't need a lot of stuff. I'm not a stuff guy, but the stuff that I want it to be nice and I want it to be quality, because if we don't buy quality, we have to buy it again. But at the end of the day, I don't need a lot of stuff. And I think one of the keys to happiness is relatively a simple life, but I do believe in free enterprise. You know what I mean? If everybody's wealthy, then that's going to be harder for us to create wealth. And I don't want anybody to struggle, but the information is available today for people that do the work and get in the know and get the mindset that they could become very successful. And that's a good thing, because money is a great protection for our families. But if we have a lot more money than that, then we can use it to fund really important things that impact millions.
Oh, that is amazing, Dan. And Dan, on another note, I wanted to ask you about your perspective on debt. So the middle class have a certain idea of debt, and it's usually negative. But how do the wealthy and the elite people view debt, and what's your opinion on it?
So this is one of my favorite subjects because as a mathematician, I love talking about debt. And I used to do a lot of big seminars to the public. I don't do a lot public facing anymore, but I would do a lot of financial seminars to the public. And I would ask people, like, how many people want more debt? No hands go up. How many people want more investments? All hands go up. And that's really our skewed perception of those words because they're neutral words, right? Most people, we think about debt as a negative. We don't want any more debt, but we love investments. What people understand is, you think about like a 2008 or COVID, what we'll find out is not every investment's a good one. And
Mhm.
also, if we really understand how debt works, we can use debt to get out of debt and create wealth. So the wealthy, they don't think about saving money and hoarding cash and living way under their means. That's the upper middle class, Dave Ramsey 30-year plan. Not knocking Dave, he's a good guy, but that's like that 30-year invest in 401ks and annuities and the S&P 500 and live under your means and hoard cash. And then we have the last 10 years of our life, we have enough to die in peace and not outlive our money. Like that is not a great quality of life, and it doesn't have to be. But the wealthy are consumed with taking on strategic debts for the accumulation of assets and passive income. And that's really the key to wealth. And there's a clue here because if you think about our government, all income is taxed and debt is untaxed. So, what's going to be the way to create wealth? It's going to be through taking on strategic debt. And so we have to kind of think about it in a different term. Now, I understand what people are saying. They're thinking about negative debts. And there's a really simple strategy that I'll give you just to get out of negative debts. Step one, really. So let's say somebody that's listening or watching this podcast has a lot of debts. Let's say they have 13 debtors every month they got to pay, whether they write a check or it's auto withdraw. There's 13 people taking a pound of flesh every month that we
Mhm.
have to suffice, right? Most people are thinking about negative debts in the wrong terms. They're thinking about terms of reduction. So I got 13 debtors. How do I get to 12? So if I got my tax return, I can use that to pay that thing off. Now I only got 12 debts. Now I'm going to 11. And since we were already used to paying 12, we could now, or 13, we could take that money and double down on 12. And that's how they're thinking. But that rarely works because of unforeseen occurrences. You get down to getting close to one of those debts paid off, your mower breaks down, your fridge breaks down, your car insurance goes up. You live in Florida, you can't get insurance because you live on the water. This happens, that happens. And it's constantly like this moving target. So we don't want to think about absolving our negative debts in terms of reduction. We want to think about it in adding, right? So for instance, if you have 13 debts and I'm helping somebody get out of debt, which is very easy to do, I wouldn't be thinking about how do I take this person from 13 to 12. I would be like, how do I take this person from 13 and walk them up to 14 debts? But that 14th debt is a very strategic debt. It absolves seven bad debts and brings us down to seven. Now, once we're at seven, I don't think six. I think, how do I walk them back up to eight? But that eighth debt is a strategic debt that mitigates four debts. And now we're down to four negative debts. And then at four, I don't think three, I think five. How do we get five? But it absorbs another four and brings us down to one. And then at one, I don't think get debt free. I'm thinking, how do I walk this person back up to two? But the service side of the debt more than pays for the debt. And we're now on the passive income wealth side of things. And then let's now take on smart debts. So a simple way to do that would be trading our revolving debts for one-term loan. So let's say you have seven credit cards, and to pay off all those credit cards is $35,000. Well, you're probably paying $1,500 to $2,000 on those credit cards.
Yeah.
You can go get a term loan, one term loan. Plus, revolving is you'll never pay it off because very little, like a dime or so, goes to principal. Everything else gets interest. It goes into interest and fees. So you're not paying those cards off. So if you trade seven revolving debts like credit cards for one term loan, you go get a $35,000 term loan, even if it's 18% APR. That's only 1.5% or so interest monthly, right?
Yeah.
And so Now your payment's probably going to be in the hundreds, well under 1,000, and you're going to have positive cash flow, 700 to a grand probably, back in your budget. Plus, you just pay off these debts until, let's say, 5 years, and then you're done. So we got to trade our bad debts for good strategic debts. That's the way to get debt free and then start taking on debts to create passive income.
And Dan, it's a paradigm shift for a lot of people who would be listening because they just assume that you have to pay off debts the normal way. But the concept of getting in debt to get out of debt,
it's counterintuitive. It goes against your cut. Like this don't feel right, but it is the strategy for sure.
So, Dan, from your entire life, what is the biggest paradigm shift that you personally had in addition to Thrive and Abundance? And what was the greatest revelation you had with regards to just like work?
Well, I think there's a couple of them. One would be work-life balance. Everybody talks about work-life balance. And we've gotten into the society today where everybody thinks like if you want to be a millionaire or beyond, you have to wear a badge of honor. Like a lot of entrepreneurs are like 80 hours a week, have a job and then build your business on nights and weekends and go hard and embrace the suck, right? Embrace the pain. I've never subscribed to that. I'm certainly not afraid of working hard. I think I have a good work ethic. And back when I was young, I was a grinder. But grinder's never going to get you to millionaire. You have to be strategic. Anybody can create wealth in 5, 6 hours a day. You don't have to do 10-hour days. You can do 25 hours a week, 30 at the max, and you can be very, very, very wealthy. But you have to be a better planner. If you don't have plans and you just run into the day and say, I'm going to get as much done as I can, then you're a grinder. And it's going to take a long time. But if you take 90 minutes in the morning, really getting quiet and thinking about a strategic approach, then you'll cut a 10-hour day into a 5-hour day. And I'm going to gain 5 hours by having 90 minutes of self-time and personal reflection. That's a big one that we think that 90 minutes, we could be busy in motion, but no, I want to take a 10-hour day and get it all done in 4 to 5 hours. And for that, I need to be strategic and have 90 minutes to strategize. The second revelation, eventually, most people, when they think about problems that are in their way when it comes to their family or problems they experience that are maybe holding them back from wealth, when I ask them, what's the problem of being wealthy? What's holding you back? Generally, when they tell you, it's actually not the problem, it's a symptom of a deeper problem. So, for instance, lack of money is never a problem, okay? It's when we have problems, then one place that's going to rear its head up is in the pocketbook and say, we got problems. But it's not the problem. Because money is controlled by causality, which is actions versus reactions. It's about how do I take 4 or 5 good actions a day, not 10 or 15. How do I take 4 or 5 good actions a day? I have good reaction on the way to meet me. And how do I make less mistakes or do less dumb stuff where I don't take bad actions that bring bad reaction and then negate the good stuff that I did? And I think about this statement a lot, which is and this is the root of a lot of problems, even money problems, is you can't consistently perform in a manner that is inconsistent with the way you see yourself. And so I can't consistently perform in a manner which is like, let's say, towards being a millionaire, if my subconscious doesn't believe it and it's inconsistent with the way I view myself. Some people might say, well, I have a money problem currently, but it's an identity problem a lot of times, or it's a value problem. Not that we don't give enough value, but we don't credit ourselves enough and we don't see ourselves in the right light, right? Other people are like, man, the value that Cosmos give, but maybe we don't see ourselves that way yet. And that's a personal work thing that we have to work on ourselves and our self-image, right? But we can't consistently perform in a manner that's inconsistent with the way we see ourselves. So we got to get out on paper and say, who do we want to be? What's the 2.0 version of me? And then we got to start feeding not our current routine, but that guy's routine. And then it becomes so.
So, Dan, here's where a lot of people, like when they're transitioning from their old self to the new self, they go through a process called the imposter syndrome where they don't believe it and then they have negative self-talk.
Yeah.
A lot of times, like it stops them from getting to the next level. So, what would be your advice to people that are trying to transition to this new version of themselves?
I remember Tony Robbins years ago telling me that he was already getting a lot of traction with his seminars. He would go out and do these seminars and people were like, Tony, he's a guru, he's amazing. And then he would go back to his one bedroom apartment and he would wash dishes in the bathtub, right? And he was like, earlier in the day, he's a rock star. And then he's going home and and he just had a breakdown. He started like crying and laughing and crying, saying, "What's wrong with me?" Right? Because you do get imposter syndrome when you're starting to stretch yourself, add more value to others. It feels like you're leading a lie, that there's two different lives, and your subconscious is saying, "Come on, dude, this ain't the real you," right? And what I have to say about that, first of all, is if we're not experiencing imposter syndrome, then something is wrong. Because if we don't have imposter syndrome, then we're not thinking big enough. We're not thinking in big enough terms when it comes to impact. We're not helping enough people because we're not being stretched. We're not experiencing enough discomfort. We're not taking massive actions that are scaring the crap out of us. So if we don't have imposter syndrome, we have a problem. How do you stay? Well, the big thing is you have to draw out on paper. It's not a natural thing. It's not organic where you just become this person because you study so much, pay enough dues, you just become a better person that's able to make more wealth. It's a conscious thing. You have to draw it on paper. What is the 2.0 version of you? What do they look like? How do they carry themselves? How do they dress? How do they talk? How do people respect them? What weight are they? Right? How fit are they? How do they eat? What's their morning routine? Today, we might not be able to handle it, but we're drawing out a different entity on paper. And then we start following, let's say Dan 2.0, we start following that person's routine. And, there's an old story about this tribe of Indians, and the father was the chief of this tribe, and he's teaching his boy a lesson, and he's telling his young son, as an elder and chief of the tribe, a story about these two wolves. There's a black wolf and a white wolf. One represents good, one represents evil, and how they're constantly fighting their enemies. And he's telling his boy this story, and the boy goes to his father and says, "Well, father, which one wins?" And the answer is whichever one you feed the most.
Yeah.
And so we're going to have certain elements of the day where we're maybe taking these new actions. We're getting on that 2.0 routine and we're feeding it, which is likely better morning routine, better organization, less active hours during the day, but more strategic action. And then we're going to have times during the day where we're that black wolf. We actually feel like we're lying and we're an imposter. Which one wins is whichever one you feed the most. So if we constantly feed the routine to the white wolf, eventually this person will become so strong, it will kill off the other version, the flaky version, the one that couldn't cut it. And then now it becomes so. That action brings a reaction of success.
No, Dan, I heard about that story. It's a very famous quote that I like grew up on regarding the wolves because there's always like a light side and dark side inside all of
Yeah,
us. And it's about what you feed on a daily basis.
right.
So, but Dan, on another note, I know you founded a university which helps people understand the entrepreneurial mindset and become entrepreneurs and start their own businesses. Can you tell me and the audience a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. As you know, I had a lot of success in the seminar business. And when you're in the seminar business, you do coaching. A lot of people want you to be a business coach, and we were very successful. And when I grew up as an entrepreneur, I was self-education, as I mentioned. And I was looking at the leaders on the block at that time, which was like Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, Tom Hopkins, Les Brown. Like these were my idols so much, or at least my mentors in business, right? And I started reading and self-educating. Well, eventually in the seminar business, I was in my 20s, early 30s, and I was caught up to them. At least financially, we were in the same area. And I was like, well, what? I don't know the next step. How much farther can I go? And it was at that time, somebody had attended my seminar that owned a university, and they asked me to be their coach. And when I got under the hood and really started looking at what we're doing, it was more of a traditional based university, and it specializes in like trade skills and crafts. But they were doing 300 million a year, private jets, this, and I thought this is the next level is have a university. And this was back in 2006. And I said, okay, I'm going to do 5 stages. Number one is write a bunch of curriculums because I'm in front of a live audience twice a week. I'm going to write a bunch of curriculums, see what lands and what's really good. I'm going to get other instructors that I know. And hey, if I ever build a university, would you be an instructor? They're like, yeah. And then it was figure out the software, get the bugs worked out, enroll several dozens of students, and then broad adoption. And then eventually not just US, but global adoption, right? And so that's where we're at now. I mean, we have a lot of students. We have a brick and mortar in Nairobi, Kenya. We try to do a lot of good. But the difference is this is so it's Blue University, BLU, which years ago stood for Business Leaders Unite, Blue University. And the difference is this is a school for people that want to be in the 1%. It's for people, whether they're young and they want to avoid a bunch of debt, or they're older, maybe they're a business owner, and they're doing okay, they're surviving well, but they're not thriving. Or maybe somebody that's an asset-rich millionaire, but they want to get in the big game. This is the kind of school because it's for entrepreneurs and business leaders by successful entrepreneurs and business leaders. So all of our instructors are at least millionaires, if not billionaires. They've done it in the real world. They're teaching real world strategies. And they're not just giving you, here's what you got to do, or just here's how you should do it. But they're breaking it down into more of the how of the how. Here's the action steps. It's the 5-step process. Here's how to do each step. Order exactly this way. And if you have any questions, just reach out to us. So it's not just here's a bunch of successful metrics and information, but we really take part in helping our students. Sometimes we fund their stuff. We invite them to live events. We get to know them as friends. We mentor them. And so it's been very great. And I don't do it for the money. I help a lot of people. I even give scholarships away very regularly because it's more about my return on investment, my ROI as an investor has not just been return on investment, but has now largely become return on impact. So it's something that I'm very passionate about in helping others.
That is amazing, Dan. And I definitely hope that people in the audience definitely take a look at how to become entrepreneurs and start their own businesses and basically change their mindset, because this is basically very important for us as a society. And Dan, is there any other projects that you're working on that you'd want the audience to get a glimpse into?
Yeah, so we've been fortunate enough to have a lot of success in our life. So we invest in things that we're passionate about or things that just could impact a lot of people. Sometimes the ROI in terms of return on investment might not be for 30 years. I'll be 55 this month, so I don't even know if I'll see those returns. But it's important for the world. It's the right thing to do. And so I am working on some passion projects as well. I wrote a movie during COVID, a feature film called The Strange. It's a sci-fi thriller that just got shot with Eric Roberts and Dee Wallace and some other actors. And that will be premiering likely early in the year, probably January. And then I just finished a second film that will probably likely, it's more of a rom-com, believe it or not. And it's more about impact and relationships. And that'll be shot likely around March. So we're doing some fun things. I wanted to also give some value on the show. Like mentioned in the intro, I've been on the show before, and I really think a lot of what you do in helping other people realize the American dream, and I really appreciate that. So I wanted to make an offer too to be able to give away 5 full scholarships to the university. The education is a real deal. It's $25,000 to attend the 2-year program, but to completely forego the 25 for 5 people and give them a chance as well, because I believe everybody deserves at least one chance. If they mess it up, it's on them, but everybody should have a chance to become successful and learn the right things. And I was fortunate enough somebody gave me that chance. I know you were as well. And I like to remember that and give back. So hopefully that'll add a little value.
Dan, thank you so much for that, and I really appreciate it. I do hope that our audience take this as an opportunity to definitely take one of your scholarships. And Dan, how can the audience connect with you and get to know more about you, your work, and everything that you're doing?
Yeah. So if they want to take advantage of that offer, they would go to Dan at bluuniversity.com, or they can go to Dan at blue.university.com. The other thing is just follow me on social media. I'm on all the things. I try to, as you know, posting on social media has never really been a big part of my plan because I just have never had to do it. But now I'm more in the philanthropic kind of vein and helping others is where I'm at in life. So I just try to get on there and add value and teach lessons and strategies that can help people. So follow me on social and feel free to reach out to me, DM me. I answer all the responses I get, no matter how many. I do answer and connect back. So
Dan, thank you so much for that. And I'm so appreciative and grateful that you took the time to come on this podcast and share your knowledge about different things such as debt and just like the economics that we have today, and also like giving people an opportunity to also become entrepreneurs and business people. And I do hope that you come on the show at a later time to share more knowledge.
Yeah, my pleasure, Cosmos. Thank you so much for having me back. And I certainly would make myself available at any time. By the way, huge fan of your show. Love what you do, man. Keep up the good work. Keep impacting people as you do.
No, I appreciate it, Dan. And I want to conclude this episode by letting my fellow extraordinary Americans know that, hey, look, there's an extraordinary within each and every one of us. It's our duty to awaken it and unleash it. Until next time, bye for now. Hey everyone, thank you for watching Extraordinary America. If you like what you see, please do subscribe to our podcast and share it with others. Remember that the best investment that you can make in your lifetime is in your own financial education, for it is knowledge that truly sets us free. Also, remember that inflation is diluting your purchasing power, which in turn increases financial bondage. The practical thing to do is to protect the loss of your purchasing power and invest in precious metals or the right cryptocurrencies. Lastly, never forget that you are an extraordinary American. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.